Jordan and Luca, welcome to Fashion Forensics.
Hello, good to be here.
So you're designers, creatives, business partners, and now husbands as of 2025. You've owned your brand, Jordanluca, for almost 7 years, and it has kind of had the attention of design of a kinky, sultry, yet a very deeply romantic and yearning aesthetic and design language. Luca, you've previously worked for Vivienne Westwood, for Gilles Sander, for Erdem. And then Jordan, you kind of dabbled in modeling. You were in the kind of early 2000 noughties editorials. And now you're designers and you own your business. So I think the first question I would like to ask you is, how does it feel to kind of look back and think about every single thing that you've done, and now that you're a business owner and a designer and everything depends on you at the end of the day?
Well, I think depends a bit which character you have, because for example, I'm never gonna be happy. So, for me, it's very hard to look always backwards and think, oh, look what I've achieved and stuff like that, because I think what I have achieved never happened yet. For me, it's always gonna come, which is a bit of a struggle at the same time, because, I wish I could enjoy a bit more what I've done, but I'm too hungry of what's next. So everything that you said right now maybe sounds like a lot, but for me it was just like a blink of eye.
Just the next step.
Just
on the
it's just
journey.
like the next things. And I've been in London for 17 years now, and all that happened in London. And London is a city that I think helped me as well to kind of move forward all the time, because every year has always been different. So everything happened very quickly for me.
I think the danger is sometimes when you just listening to what Luca's saying, I think when you get what you wanted, when you arrive to where you thought you were going to be, you've already 4 steps ahead. And I think the danger sometimes, especially working in fashion, which is so fast paced, that I think that you don't, that sometimes we don't have enough time to be able to say, actually, this is really great achievement, because by the time you get it, it's not enough. And I think it becomes really insatiable. I can never get what I need, because by the time I get it, I'm already moved on. So I think there is a danger in that, and I think there's a kind of slowing down. We're older. We're 40. Dare I say it? I think, but I think what that comes with is inherently is a little bit more slowness, if I could say that. I mean, a bit more slow, it's a bit more. It's living life a bit more calm, thinking about things outside of fashion. I love what we've got, and I'm really proud of what we've got. I think we're both looking outside of that as well, to enrich that and fulfill ourselves inside and outside the job. So yeah, I think it's an interesting point to be at.
I think there's the seasonality of the industry makes you also kind of just keep running and not stop and think, well, wow, like I did achieve that. Or oftentimes other people might get lost in the fact thinking that what you're doing now is forever, or my position for this specific aesthetic or design is forever. And I think...
And, living with a deadline as well. I think I'm a bit like... I'm struggling with this right now. This is why we're like trying to expand outside of fashion as well. Because how many times we're on holiday and people say, "Where did you go last holiday?" And we start saying, "Oh, last season we went to Sicily."
Yeah.
Like you really leave your deadlines and the seasonality of fashion.
I remember Luca came home from work when he was working at Westwood. He came back from work and he was shocked. He was really upset. And he said that, "I can't believe what Vivienne said to me." She said to me on reflection, she said, Luca, my life has just been 60 seasons. And Luca, I remember really clearly, actually, Luca said to me, how awful must that be to think of your life in that way? And, here we are thinking about, you break things in, you break your whole life down into this kind of like circadian rhythm of fashion, autumn, winter, spring, summer.
Yeah.
Yeah, and there is life beyond, and I think that I love it, and I'm really happy, and I love the thrill of that, and I love the pressure and the stress. Of course, I love that,
and of course,
the endorphins.
of course,
there's life beyond.
And fashion is eating a lot of time, obviously, in our life, but we're making a point to look for something else other than that.
Yeah, to kind of enrich your visual bank of memories, because I think because fashion is an industry that relies so much on human connection and human experiences, I think you need to live life in order to be a fulfilled fashion creative, because that's where your inspiration comes from. That's the first step of your work, is to be able to live life and have negative, positive, strange experiences.
Absolutely. And we are lucky because we're two, because it's such a tough job that and life that it's like, it's good to have each other to talk about. We're very different as well. And I think one fulfill like what's lacking the other one. For example, I am a beast in the machine room. When
Yeah.
we're talking about garments with the pattern cutter, with the machinist, I'm the lion of the room. But then you put me in a fashion party, I'm like in a toilet shaking with social anxiety.
And I don't even smoke. I'm in the smoking area.
And
Yeah.
I can't.
Mm.
This is why I never go out. This is why I can't do that. But Jordan is the opposite. Maybe he's a bit more less confident in the workspace on the actual garment side, but then he's this kind of PR side that when we go out, I push him forward to talk
Yeah.
to people and have this human connection because I can't do that.
We antagonize each other, and I think what we're both good at, and we kind of taunt each other's skills to bring out something. Sometimes not even the best in each other. Sometimes it's like the rage or the fury, and I think that friction, I think, is very much what the brand is built. You know what it's like, but that's very much what Jordanluca is built on, is a little bit of that friction, a little bit of that tension.
The tension
and
of
relying
yin
a little bit on the fact, that we're going to fucking argue a lot. We do, which we do. But I think it's all for common cause. It's all for the good of the brand. It's all for
to kind of fulfill those
for the vision of what we
have.
have, because we're very, very different. Very different in what we want, different in what we like. But somehow we've got this quite unified vision of what we want and where we think the brand is going.
And when you think about fulfilling kind of each other from two opposite ways, like, I want to know how you would describe the other in a business spectrum. You said about how your business has been mostly successful because you come from two very different backgrounds. Would you say that, Luca, you're kind of the as you said, the garment machinist, all about the silhouette because of your experience, and then Jordan, you're kind of the visual master of the storyline? Is that how you would describe yourself?
That's more or less how it's broken down. Yeah, I think I would probably describe. Luca has a very good capability to be able to kind of see 360 on the garment, to see from the garment across all of the different categories that we're working on, the shoes, the things. I'm different. My brain is different. It's wired very, very differently. Luca's laughing. My brain is wired very differently, and I'm better actually. I'm better at working at image. I'm better at things that exist. I'm better in a fitting, for example, things that are real, and then working out and trying to decipher then what to do with it. But kind of working on design, it's working on the design from essentially from nothing. There's a kind of gap in my brain for that part. So we like I said, we kind of fill in each other's gaps.
But also, like, socially, we're very different, no? Like I said, Jordan feels more the gap about this kind of face of the brand. Because if it was for me, I don't want to exist. I would love to be behind the scene. I don't wear fashion clothes. I like to have my same uniform, cheap look covered with threads. And, I'm happy. That's where I'm happy. Then you say, oh, tonight we need to go to the party. I have to make an effort to dress up, get ready. And he loves that part. For me, it's like inconvenient.
Yeah. And I think that maybe the reason why you have had such a successful tenure into fashion and breaking, a hard part of the industry, which is menswear, is exactly those 2 points of view, because you can see the two sides of who that Jordanluca man is. And now with women's wear, would you say that you wanted to kind of was the decision to start with menswear without women's wear intentional, or was that something that you just wanted to play upon your strengths?
Well, I was always fascinated by menswear, just in kind of how many rules there are, and I think we both come from sort of Catholic backgrounds. I think we kind of like the rules somehow. I like to stick to the rules, and I like to bend the rules. I like to know what the rules are to be able to bend them and break them. but yeah, menswear is not so free. It's not frivolous. It's you know, it's kind of set in its ways, and I think there is, for me, that's actually more fun. I think there's more fun to be able to play within the rules and the boundaries of menswear. What you can push with menswear, I think, you can't really push so much with womenswear, because it's kind of already been done. So, for example, when I because I studied at hat school. I made hats for probably 9 or 10 years after I worked for Stephen Jones. And I was the first one there. It was an evening hat school. It was an evening hat college. Loads of women, loads of lovely girls making pretty flowers made out of straw. And I was the only one that really wanted to do menswear. I wanted to do men's hats, and they didn't know what to do, because they'd never made a men's hat. I'm like, guys, come on! But so for me, it was always part of very much of my design language, of kind of what I wanted to create and what I wanted to set about and do in my career. So that's kind of where we started. And of course, but I think what we found with menswear is that it is restrictive, and I think, you do the menswear to a point, and it gets to a point, and then it gets, you can break menswear, that's fine. You can break the boundaries and things, but there's some points where, you can take it too far. It's too much. And then in the end, you just do women's wear. It's okay. Save those ideas for the girls. It's okay. And I think we love to, I think we at the beginning, actually, we tried to kind of create this kind of hybrid, no genderless stuff, and it doesn't really work. I think we're much more comfortable in creating, an archetype of a woman, an archetype of a man, and then fucking with whatever happens in between. I think that's more fun. I think it's more regimented.
Yeah. And thinking about your kind of visual memories throughout your life that have taken you to this point of designers, I want to start with the kind of, when you gave me your 5 images, it was really interesting to see how personal they were, because they were almost represent a milestone, whether a milestone in your life, Jordan, or in your life, Luca. And it's almost like a visual journey of how you got here, and how the kind of personality of it all is, there's a really human side to it. When you think about what was your visual language, it comes from your own experiences. And I wanted to start with the first image, which is a baby picture of you, Jordan.
Shall I hold it up?
So, you can kind of look at it. Tell me a little bit about why you chose this picture.
That, I think, was probably 1985. I have a press clipping of that my mum sent me years ago. I think it was punk. I can't remember. It was like reprobate punks or something in destroying the piece or upsetting the piece or something in the paper. But yeah, I come from kind of punk. My parents are punks, and for me, that's really, really fundamental to, not just because it was punks, because I think that word is overused, but they were, that's kind of where I'm from. But especially, coming into working into Jordanluca with Luca, I think that cultural heritage that the UK has, it suddenly became much more important to me, because thinking, well, what can I draw on? Sometimes I'm like, like Luca was saying about the design, sometimes I'm like, well, I can design certain ways, but in the kind of classic way of design, sometimes I'm not very good at that stuff. So what can I draw on? What can I draw on from my own references and my own history and my own, my past, that I can draw on, that I can bring to the table? But of course, and I think for a long time, I kind of overlooked where I'm from. And I think for me, that's actually so fundamental to who I am, how I think, what is my kind of, what are my drivers as a designer? What are my drivers as a human being? I am fascinated and I'm always drawn to defiance, trying to think differently, even when I shouldn't, even when it's unnecessary. So that is just part of who I am and what I'm about. So, and I don't think that you could get away with that now. And I just love it, because it's just really funny. We've seen something in recent times where I think that would have been shut down and cancelled. So I am quite proud of that. It's quite funny. Me with a toy rat. 1985, suburban England, probably, a council flat. My mom was a punk. My dad was in prison. It really draws on where I'm from and what I'm about. My auntie, for example, was at the time she was a new romantic. So I think these cultural references that Britain, England, and London is very, very rich, is part of where I'm from. So I'm really proud of that image. Yeah.
And Luca, you grew up in Italy, and your upbringing was different to it. How was your
Completely
upbringing?
different than Jordan. What I wanted to add on what he said is my fascination for punk. Like I moved to this country because I was fascinated about the movement aesthetically, how these people looked. And when my generation, I didn't experience that in real life. So I'm just referencing that from books and pictures and stuff like that. When I look at his family album, it was real. Everything I loved, his mom was embodying it, from more clothes, everything I loved.
A string vest and a can of beer,
Bonded-
cigarette.
bonded
Teenage mother,
brothers, and and the police, and Hold by the Police, like this amazing picture, it was all real. So, that's definitely added more points on him when I met him. But yeah, my upbringing completely different. Coming from north of Italy in the mountains, beautiful spot. My
A lot of nature.
lots of nature, lots of snow. My
Lots
family
of
is like
snow.
my family is like advertising family of biscuits. Everything is happy, everything is good. Like a bit privileged, and I have a brother, and my parents were actually hippies. So
So where did that
completely.
defiance then come into you to put into your work? Did you have that defiance growing up?
I never had it. That's why I ran away from it.
Interesting.
This is why I had to run away from all that. I love my family, I love everything about them, but I had to run away because I needed this. I'm a rock. That's why I love this city. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
I'm a metropolitan rock. And I love that.
He does love
And
it, actually.
and this is why I love to ride my bike. I love to be in the traffic and all this stuff. This is why I have a very short resistance in the nature.
Yeah.
You can bring me in a forest for 3 days, but I want to go back to my.
To your
It's so
my
funny. It's so
city,
funny.
to
The
my-
kind of role reversal, especially kind of later into our relationship. This kind of flip that we're experiencing. This kind of role reversal in terms of like, where I'm from. Where I'm from, like council flat Britain, working class Britain, and for me, kind of becoming more Italianizing myself, and people saying, "Are you Italian?" No, but proudly saying no. But and Luca becoming more English, especially after Brexit. She loves it, Luca's like, she's so excited after Brexit. Luca keeps saying, it got much more exciting after Brexit because it got much more narrow-minded, which she loves. The more British it gets, for better or worse, the more British it gets, the more Luca gets turned on. So, but it's really interesting how we have evolved
just because I really, really love this country and I love the aesthetic of this country. So for me, Brexit emphasized the
Britishness.
So it makes my eyes happier. That's all about it. I didn't vote Brexit for that.
I mean, you told me one time in a conversation that your favorite part of London is literally Bank. It's
Oh my God,
a
that's what I
stone's throw from
That's
here.
what I want my ashes to be. Bank. I mean that cross where you have the monument there
By
and
the
you can
Royal
see,
Exchange,
the
yeah.
city, and there is always a red bus passing by like that. Please spread my ashes when I'm dead. That's the point.
And I think it's really interesting when you talk about Jordan, you've grown up in those subcultures, and Luca, you kind of looking at it from a different point of view. When you first met, so you famously met, as I think a lot of people know, you famously met in the line for the toilets at a club.
Now everybody knows.
I think from your wedding, everybody knows the story. But what was that kind of punk energy that Jordan had? Is that what draw you to him when you first met? And like, what was the initial spark?
I mean, when I met Jordan that night at Joiner, so he had a mohawk to start with, and he was wearing head to toe Westwood, the Slash and Cool collection. So it was all a piece of / denim.
Because of course and those were gifted. I think those were gifted to her from Westwood, and gifted to me from my aunt, who I mentioned, my aunt Kim, and she gave them to me. So it's this kind of long line of kind of legacy and heritage kind of passed down. So yeah, I was wearing that stuff.
So
I'd been to a party.
and I was working at Westwood, so that was just not.
It's like a fate. It's meant to be.
Yeah, that was not just a guy wearing a Westwood piece. That was a hot guy wearing archive pieces. So of course I was like, who the fucking are you? I was actually that night I was naked wearing a blanket. That's it. So it was just like we had to match.
And that energy is kind of what has, honestly, that energy, I think, knowing you, is you've carried that through to your career, and I think what you have created.
But the crazy thing about it is, whenever we're gonna go to the second picture of Jordan, then I'm gonna tell you something crazy about it as well.
I mean, let's go actually to the second picture then.
So maybe before he says about the picture, I just want to say that picture, I've been using it in my exam when I left the fashion school in Milan.
Wow.
So I used him as reference in my mood board in Milan without even knowing that it existed. Isn't it fucking crazy?
There's something really interesting about soulmates and this idea of the soul that psychology tells us, which I think when you look at life, there's just so many little stones that have led you to the right path, and I think that this is like just a great example of it.
Yeah, because of course I did my last project was about London, was about fun, was about Britishness, and of course Dougie came in the picture, and that shot of him wearing his classic red suit with the black velvet collar, that came obviously the first one of the first picture, and I used it, and that was Jordan, and I didn't know.
So your second image that you chose that we're speaking about is Jordan. You're photographed by Sebastian Kim in Comme des Garçons.
That's right.
In a kind of story about Ray Kawakubo. And
it was a feature on Dougie, and actually I met Dougie. When I was working for Stephen Jones. I was only supposed to work at Stephen Jones for 2 weeks, and he said, I need some, because it's a family friend and stuff, and I thought, okay, fine, I'll go and do this thing. Come paint some plant pots for an exhibition that I'm doing for a couple of days, and a couple of days turned into a couple of weeks, whatever. So, but the plant pots were for an exhibition at Dover Street Market, and now I worked there. I continued to work there. The 2 weeks actually lasted, I think, 8 years. But in the meantime, we set up this exhibition at Dover Street, and actually that exhibition, the Stephen Jones exhibition, was where I saw Duggie Fields, who I didn't know then at the time when I saw him, but we met on the tube at Green Park. Another chance encounter that I think I don't really believe how much I believe in fate and destiny, but I do believe that you make your own luck, and I think that when an opportunity is given to you, you there's something about the opportunity, you grab it and you seize it, and I think you make your own luck. So, but yeah, me and Dougie met on the tube, and actually I mentioned my aunt again because we got talking, and then he said, I was reading, actually, funnily enough, I was reading his blog yesterday, so I was looking at this picture and he died 4 years ago. But I was reading his blog, and he wrote that we met a chance encounter on the tube, but the interesting thing about Dougie is that he was very, very generous, very generous with his time, with his things, with his art, but years before, probably 25 years before, in the early 80s, he'd actually gifted my aunt Kim, lots of furniture. So for him, it was a kind of generational thing that. So he recognized me as, so he said in his blog, he recognized me as someone's son, and he said it wasn't someone's son, it was someone's nephew. And when he realized it was Kim Bowen's nephew, so there's this link back for me again. There's this link back to the 80s, to all this subculture, all these things that were happening in the 80s, and for me it felt like a path. Not that I'd trodden, but it felt very familiar. I know, I'm friends with a lot of those kids from the 80s, a lot of those people from the 80s and 90s who actually I didn't have anything to do with because I was too young, but who we're friends with, but I'm friends with now because they're friends of family. So there's this within London, I think within London particularly, there's there's this very, very big sense of family and extended family. And I've got lots and lots of uncles. Dougie was one of those. But Dougie, and I don't say this lightly, but Dougie really changed my life. He changed the way that I thought, and that was very early on in my career. I was making hats at that point, but he really transformed the way that I thought, the way that I thought about color, the way that I thought about absurdism. Dougie was very absurd, and very, very enduring, a very enduring presence in my life, and a very, very good friend. And was one of my best friends. And he died unfortunately 4 years ago. But I don't think about him. I don't think about like a person. I think I'm like almost like a kind of like a god, like some. I sort of think to him, and I think to him, and I question him, and he answers questions for me, and I have a running dialogue with Dougie. So, but I don't say it. I wouldn't say it lightly, but he really changed my life, and I'm really, really so much better for having known him. He was really a magical person,
I mean, it's such a interesting way of how that chance encounter then left an impression on you through a different way, and it almost I think it's really interesting what you're talking about, how there is like life gives you opportunities to connect the dots, and it's your kind of responsibility to connect them. And I think that's one of those sliding door moments that we talked
It really
about.
was, yeah, it really was.
And was such an important part of his life, looking from the outside as being next to Jordan, Jordan's father was never present. So Dougie really kind of fulfilled this figure as well.
Yeah.
I spent all this lifetime with Jordan that he was always together with Dougie in some way or another. The weekends we were spending with Dougie.
It was like this very odd twosome. he was 40 years older than me, but we were very, very close.
I remember that when actually I met Jordan, one of the first, like, this is gonna be a bit uncomfortable to tell you, but I need to ask you. I say, is he your daddy or something? It's like, is there something going on that you need to tell me?
No, it's funny because Dougie, when I met him on the tube, actually, I forgot about this. When I met him on the tube, and I'd been around, even at 22, I'd been around, so Dougie said to me, he was in his 60s at that point. Dougie said to me, we have to meet up and you come over for tea. And I'm like, oh my God, no, not tea. Not tea. I've like, please not tea, because the tea is obviously like coffee, isn't it? And come up for a coffee and let's like do stuff. But and I went upstairs, kind of think, oh no, please don't. And he didn't. It was just tea.
But he went up
Just
there.
green tea. I went up anyway. I went up anyway, so I'm curious. But yeah, it was green tea, and Dougie, it was really just green tea. Dougie drank it religiously, but yeah, he was really, really special and fascinating, and I think he was one of those people, one of those very, very rare people that kind of transcended time. Was a really key part of every zeitgeist from the 60s through the 70s and 80s, and all throughout his life was very, very kind of intrinsic to whatever was happening at the time, because people just loved him, and I felt very privileged to be his friend. So yeah, it was fun. It was fantastic. It was a fantastic friendship.
When you talk about this image as well, is like, I'm really curious, when did you make this connection that this was on your mood board and like such a special picture and such a special story to Jordan? What do you remember that moment where you guys kind of
was when maybe we moved together and we start adding up, because I moved in Jordan's flat. So obviously we have to change completely the flat. So that's the moment that we start taking everything out from boxes and stuff like that. And I think that's when I realized, especially because it's so different, Jordan, in that picture.
Yeah.
It's I mean, I see a massive difference for how I know aesthetically Jordan. So like I didn't connect the dots straight away. But when I realized that, it was a bit of a shock thing, because it's like, come on, how many chances that with all the picture I could have choose of Dougie that were available on Google, that I went on that one that is next to Jordan, and I would meet this guy. Like, I think about 5 years later, and then here we are, and
yeah.
brand, married, blah, 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 all these things.
From life.
And actually, I'm wearing in the picture. I'm wearing, and Dougie's wearing one of the badges. He made a portrait of me. The first time I went round there, so maybe the second time I went round there, I went out in drag. And I was really messy, because that's when I used to take. I was a mess, let's say, quite colourful. in my early 20s, and yeah, I had a pair of high heels in my rucksack, and the heel was sticking out. And I walked past one of his paintings, and it scraped the painting, and I kind of dusted it off, and he didn't notice. And actually, that was the same evening. He took a picture of me right there and then, because I was like in half makeup and stuff, and he created this portrait of me. You can see it here in the badge, but oh yeah, so that was yeah, it was really it was fun. It was a
That
fun
was
time, and
your
actually, it was the first time when hadn't known each other very long. When he was like 64 or something, I can't remember how old he was, and I just didn't know what to buy him for his birthday. I was like, "What do I buy him for his birthday?" They've got everything. They've got everything. Knowing everyone, he knew everyone. Everyone that you could ever imagine, he knew, was friends with them all. So, but what do I buy him for his birthday? So I had this really mad cookbook from the 70s, and I thought, well, I'll make him a jelly. So it was this green. He loved it. So he loved it so much. It was really hot days, birthdays in August, and I made him. And I was living in this hostel at the time in Earl's Court, around the corner from where he lived. So I made this jelly. It was green jelly. It was called Bunnies on the Lawn. It was fantastic. It was a green jelly, bright green jelly. It was tin pears as the bunnies. I put little almonds for the ear, almonds for the ears, chocolate drops for the eyes, and those little sugary flowers for the lawn and things. And he loved it. It was really fun.
It's so special to, what you get somebody that has everything in their life and they've achieved so much.
He loved it. He just thought it was, because he was surrealist. Dougie was a surrealist and an absurdist at heart. So he thought it was completely bonkers and loved it. So yeah, it was interesting.
I think, mentorship and your mentors, those people that really leave a big imprint on your life, is something that we constantly talk about. And the importance of it, I think, is so special, because we all come from different backgrounds where not necessarily our families can be our mentors for what we want to do in life.
And the fathers. And I think there's a lot of emphasis on, people talk, we joke, especially in the queer community, about daddies and things. But if you think about it, how important those daddies actually are. There's people that think, oh, it's a daddy or it's a sugar daddy, and it's not. It's people that are guides and figures and mentors, and people that have time to slow you down and to love you, because actually quite often, like I said, my father wasn't around, but there are many Duggies that stepped in. There are many people like Dougie that stepped in to fulfill and to be there when actually I didn't feel like I had many people around me. So thank God for people like that, in our community.
And speaking of mentors, Luca, one of the images that you chose, the next image I wanted to talk to you about, is the great Vivienne Westwood. Would you say that she was one of your biggest mentors in life, and why did you choose this image of her?
Well, I choose Vivienne because obviously she has been a milestone of my life. It's like I started. My life was supposed to be completely different. I was supposed to be a doctor. So, and one day I walked into her store just because I went to see my friend. I was studying medicine in Padua, and I went to see my friend in Milan. I just walked into the store and I said, "What the fuck is this? I mean, what are those clothes? Like, I'm this. I need to work for this. Who is this person?" So, I did lots of research and I switched. I called my parents. They say I'm gonna quit medicine and I'm gonna start doing fashion. So,
And how was the reaction to that?
well, so my parents have always been super supportive. So they support that 100%. Obviously, it was a bit of a shock. Obviously, it was a more of a uncertain future awaiting for me, but I wanted to do that. I started studying fashion, and I really believe in life that if you put all your energy to to achieve what you really want, I know that you can get it. You just have to have the energy for it. And like what I did was like studying for her, meeting people that lead me to her, and creating my connection because that connection would have brought something for her. And I completely made my way through. And when I got the last year, I got the opportunity. I met Andreas at school, and he came for a talk, and I got the opportunity to have an internship in Westwood. And I said no. I said, I'm not gonna go in Westwood as an intern. I'm gonna say yes to Castelbajac, because still was a good brand at the time. It was still designing, but I was not very interested in Castelbajac. I said, I don't want to go in Westwood as an intern. So I'd rather make my experience somewhere else. Because when I go into Westwood, I want to go in from the main door, not from the kitchen window. So, and that's what I did. And I started working for Castelbajac, I started working for G. Sander, and then I had my life in Milan. I had a boyfriend, I had a flat, I had my life. I was there for 9 years. And then I say, okay, I think now I'm ready. And I left Milan on a Friday. And on Friday morning, I landed and I went to the Westwood studio. And
What were you wearing?
was August. Was fucking hot. And to impress, I was wearing a cashmere blanket, felted. It's like with the scarf around my neck, just because I wanted to wear the piece of my favorite piece, everything. And I was sweating so much. But again, life, circumstances, soulmates, call it whatever you want. I'm arrived at the door. I go in with my book. And there was this secretary downstairs. It was a different building, completely different setup. And I said, I want to have an interview. And they said, do you have an appointment? I said, no, I don't have an appointment. And they said, well, you can have an interview. So I was a bit like, okay, obviously it was like that. I just turned. I'm about to leave the building. And Vivienne comes in with her bike, just in the moment. And
Sliding door moment.
and of course she looks at me and with the blanket, and you cannot notice me in that situation. And she said, who are you? And I say, I'm here because I'm working for you. And she was shocked. And it just came out like that. And she said, okay, I have an interview with Bridget. So this poor Bridget, and now we're friends, obviously she has to stop her lunch, come downstairs, have an interview with me. You know what I mean? Because of course Vivienne said to her that she had to have an interview with me. And that's it. And I got the job the day after, and it was Saturday. And from that day, I never went back to Milan. That's 17 years in London. So I had to leave my flat from London to Milan. I had to split up with my boyfriend. We tried to be a bit together in the transition, but of course it didn't work. All my friends, I left there. And at the beginning, I was like, I could have done anything in the company. I just wanted to be part of the company. But then I was so passionate about our work that I knew everything. I knew all the archive pieces, I knew all the collection. And she and Vivienne and Andreas, they could not notice that, I think. And then in a couple of months, they offered me the position as both design assistant. So that's where suddenly I spent 8 years every day with them. And of course, it's been an incredible experience. And Vivienne, she's always gonna be a major part of my life. And like I always said, and I decided to leave the company, and I left. And like I always say that for me, the best things I did in my life was joining Westwood, and the second best things I did was leaving Westwood. So I absolutely have no regret in that. I think it was the best things I ever did. And I kept this relationship with Viv until the end, and I'm still friends with Andrea. So like has been incredible. And what Vivienne, what I learned from Vivienne and the things I experienced.
What's the most
with her.
fundamental thing you learned from Vivienne, or something that she said?
Well, she said many things.
No, but
obviously,
like the thing.
No, I can't say. I can't. Well, I mean, obviously, Vivienne was a character, and I like I think Vivienne, like she says all the time that she was a fighter, and fuck hell, she was a fighter. You know what I mean? It's like that. If she believed in something, she went. She didn't see anything else rather than her mission, and I think it's amazing if you can be really like this, and she was really like that. And I loved how she always said that punk for her was like she always changed idea with the time, but what I always loved about what I agreed as well with her is like for her punks people, they aesthetically look beautiful. And something that people can maybe not really understand, when you
Yeah.
see people with full of holes and mohawk and safety pins and stuff like that, like I'm thinking my mom doesn't think that looks beautiful, but my brain is wired different. I think that it's aesthetically pleasing. And, and this is what she always told me, and that I couldn't agree, and I couldn't agree more with her. And then, I spent lots of time with Andreas as well, because, I have to say that, Andreas has been part of the company like 50% with Vivienne. So, like we always mention Vivienne, but Andreas was incredible mentor for me as well. Like in the fitting and in the toiling and during pattern cutting and all this stuff. I mean, Andreas is incredible. Andreas for me is another genius.
What have you taken, both of you, what have you taken from both of your mentors that we spoke about, Dougie, we spoke about Vivienne? What is kind of the one thing that you've taken into your business, into the next chapters of your life that you always come back to, that you learned during that time?
Well, for me, I start, but because I can see this now, I can see this. Maybe I could not see before, but I clearly see now in my life is like, Vivian always said to me, fashion is a bit boring. Fashion was for Vivian, fashion was like an inconvenient thing. She always said, I'm very good at it and I'm doing it, but it's not that. It's much more. And you need to have much more. And my fashion life completely changed. When I was younger, when I was in Milan, if I wasn't dressed head to toe Prada, I wouldn't leave my house.
But it's hard to imagine what Luca says now, but then it was like a fanatic.
Yeah.
Everything had a squiggle, everything had a check, everything had a pattern. It was so Westwoodized.
But even before Westwood,
but even looking at looking at your designs, looking at your looking at the looking through your artworks, looking at your education. I'm just really curious about some of your like sketches and everything from the very start, from the very beginning. Everything led to Westwood. Everything was so catered to that aesthetic. It's interesting.
But I think like that there is a period in my life where I think most of people experience that you think that fashion is it. That is it, and is an ecosystem where you can survive in it. But then I think with the time or with my experience, or maybe this is what happened to me, but I could see that this happened to Vivienne as well. It's like, that's not enough. I want to break the bubble of fashion. I need to expand my interest. So, of course, now fashion is my life, is my passion, whatever. But my life is so much more than the brand. And I'm so happy about it. You know what I mean? It's like we make see what the brand is, but even on social media, like we have the brand account and we have my own personal account. And lots of people say, but do you work? Of course I work. I sweat my ass off. I just don't want to fucking show you that on my account. I'll show you anything else on my own account because I love my life as well. And yes, lots of people say, your job is your life because if you love your job is your life and all this fucking bullshit stuff that we tell to each other. But yes and no, you know what I mean? It's like it's such a demanding job, fashion, that it's not always like beautiful things and pretty things and sketching figurini at Pantone. My job is like 90% being an accountant.
Yeah. So trying to not hemorrhage money from different holes in the business.
Of course, and managing people and all this stuff, that's not fun. Yeah. That's work. So, it's like you need to have things in your life that are outside that. And the thing that what Vivienne always told me was that, to really cultivate your interests that are not in fashion. And I couldn't understand. It's like, oh my God, you're Vivienne Westwood, the queen of punk. How can you say that? It's like, but then I think it's something that you develop maybe with the time, with the age. I don't know, that you realize, no, wait a second.
It's like when you get older, you think, oh my God, when you say about your parents, you're like, oh my God, you were right.
Yeah.
You get to a point where you're like, I'm so sorry, you were right. You were right all along.
She was right, yeah.
Now you see, I think even though I'm much younger than you guys, being in this industry for almost 10 years now, I see that like there's never a moment where you kind of think to yourself, oh, I made it. When you're young, you think, oh, I'm going to have this moment, I'm going to get this job, I'm going to achieve this, and I'll make it. And when you do that, it's very positive and it's so fulfilling. But I think the more you are in it, the more you start to realize and love the balance of your life, the fact that you're this multifaceted person. And I think that's so important because, fashion is one of the very few industries in life where we live our life inside of it 24/7, especially as creatives, as editors, as designers, and everybody part of the process. I think it really speaks to the fact that the older you get or the more successful you get, the more you want peace and the more you want balance in your
Especially
life.
in London, I think maybe things are taken out of a little bit out of context in the bigger in the wider world, because we haven't got the UK hasn't got mills, it hasn't got as many mills, it hasn't got production factories, we haven't got the industry in the UK. So I think the UK is the UK fashion industry is it relies on us being in this bubble to create this thing, to create this fantasy, to create this sense of emerging talent, raw emerging talent, radical thinkers. We need that, and without that bubble and without that delusion, what is it? Because it's just stuff. It's just stuff.
Jordan, what did Dougie teach you that you've taken with yourself?
Dougie was very, very disciplined, almost to the point where, thinking, why do you need to do it? He did it earlier, but he was very, very disciplined. He was very disciplined. He did the same thing every single day. And I'm talking about to a point where it was like almost like a kind of some disorder, but it was amazing. It was incredible. He would stretch at 10 o'clock for half an hour, 40 minutes, just do stretching. He would go for a walk around the graveyard, Brompton Cemetery, and then he would work. And he was very, very disciplined about working. And it didn't matter what he was working on. He would work, or how slow, because of course, later on he got a bit slower because he was dealing with cancer. But it didn't matter how slow he would work. He would just do it. He was very, very disciplined, and it was fascinating to watch. But he was yeah, and I think that's the big takeaway for me, is just to really get your head down. I remember my auntie said to me, she said to me when I was about to set off in my career, she said, Jordan, bust a gut. Bust a gut. Make sure you just fucking get your head down and work. And that's what we've done. Sometimes it feels like we're pushing a rock up a hill. And every season, sometimes, this season's going to be the one, next season's going to be the, and then, and it took a while, and it's really started to change, but for many, many years. And of course, even before Jordanluca, there was other projects that we had. There were other projects that we had with Jordanluca that just felt like we were, it's like, what was that expression? Trying to stop a river with a fork or something like that. You just can't stop it. And it's just, you're in it, and you're in it for life. And I think that's probably one of the biggest takeaways that I've learned from my mentors. Stephen Jones, of course, was another big mentor for me. And I think the biggest, most important one that Stephen said to me, apart from all the creativity, because he's this wealth of creativity, of course, but he said, just get in every camera. He said, make sure you get in every camera, in every party, and make sure that your name is out there. Because of course he's kind of media fashion darling, and everybody loves him. And I think that's another really key takeaway. Kind of superficially, but that's a really good point as well. Just but to make yourself known, to make yourself to ingratiate yourself with people, to make sure that you're liked, to make sure that you are liked enough that people want to collaborate with you. I think there's no greater collaborator than Stephen Jones. So I think that's been a really interesting takeaway as well. If we're thinking about something that maybe seems a bit superficial, but actually is something that's very important, just to be a nice person.
And this push and pull that you talked a little bit about, like getting down and really working hard. I kind of saw a little bit of that in the next picture that we're going to talk about, which is the Dante and Virgil that you chose. To me, it really reminded me of a very kind of almost paradoxical way of the way that you deal with designing for kind of different genders and gender stereotypes and gender norms. I think there's a real tension in your work. What was the thought behind choosing this?
I think I choose this picture because I think this picture is like me in one frame, honestly. It's like it's everything I love, everything I went through, and everything I'm at as well at the moment. And it's like it's uh, it's art to start with. So of course, art was always very important in my life, and like I started studying science, and I'm so thankful for the upbringing in science, because even if it was a science school, the teacher I had in literature was one of my first mentor in life, if we want to talk about mentors. And he gave me the love for art and literature. And I discovered Dante. I discovered the hell of Dante and of the Divina Commedia, which is one of the most beautiful things I've ever read in my life. I always say to Jordan, I'm not very nationalistic, Italian shit and stuff like that, but I always say to him, I'm so sorry for people that are not Italian, they cannot experience the hell of Dante in the original language, because such a beautiful thing. And this is a scene from there, but also is this fight between these two people, eternally damned, doomed to fight and bite each other. And it's the obsession that I have, and Jordan has as well. That's something that we put all the time into the collection, is our obsession with humanity. Humanity is always like the starter of our collections. We are obsessed with it, in the goods or in the bad. And Jordan is focused more on the, let's say, on the mental side of it. I'm focused more on the physical side of it. And I think this is why our interest outside of fashion, Jordan is about more therapy and kind of stuff, when actually my passion are more on the on the body and the nutritionism side and all this stuff. But everything is so connected to what we're doing, and to the fact that I love thinking how animals we are. It's something that the more I grow up, and the more I'm studying about therapy and nutrition and body and stuff like that, the more I realize how the machine we are, and about the animalistic side of humanity. And I think it's so fascinating. And I think that the fact that people are trying to avoid that, it's very dangerous. I don't know, maybe I'm a sophist, I don't know, like this kind of philosophy that ask, is it how good is to follow your human nature? Are you more happy to follow fully as an animal, or is the social restriction make you more happy because you're restricting what the animal would have, what the animal would do? So this constant battle between these is something that really fascinates me. This is all my books. This is what I read. I don't read romance and novels. So this is all about my real interest outside of fashion mostly. So it's a picture that for me portray all that, and the tension, like I say, like this tension that we always try to express in the brand and what we do.
Yeah, and that kind of almost like a conflict. You mentioned earlier, Jordan, that there is something really fascinating about gender norms and how people follow them. But then if you know where the rules are, you know how to break them and you know how to do it. So that tension is really can oftentimes be poignant in fashion. And
Well, yes, and right now we are working with people that are very. We were joking the other day. There are some people that they love rules. What I mean? Like, we're working with some people that everything is in a calendar, is a deadline, and I appreciate that, but it's very different mindset. It's like they love a
We're
rule.
working with someone. We're
They love a rule.
them or him or her.
Yeah, whatever.
They love a fire exit.
No, but they love a
They love the fire exit.
they love the fire exit. But they love a rule to be respected. I love a rule because I want to break it. And it's a completely different type side when you realize how people are made, like different we are. I think it's so fascinating. And I think like good that we're people like that exist. This is why I love to live in Notting Hill. everybody say to me, "Oh, but you don't look. You should live in East London. You don't look like a West boy." But yeah, that's what I love about it. I love to be this my little skanky rat walking around those houses in Portobello Road. I love that. Because I feel more special in that. So that's for me. It's always fascinating these things.
And would you say the Jordanluca muse in your designs, have they changed throughout the years, or have they always been?
He's always the same. He's a drug dealer in Labo Grove.
Perfect.
It's him.
You know exactly who. And in women's wear,
his girlfriend. Amazing.
and it's always, and it's kind of
amazing.
telling the story of them.
And it doesn't. The thing is, it doesn't matter how much we change the collections, even if it's high to low. He's always the guy that you think, fucking hell, he's amazing. This guy, he's just like snake print jerseys, track pants, and then he'll wear like some weird bit of suiting, but it's always him. He's a drug dealer.
Yeah, it's
and he's
incredible.
fascinating. Yeah, and
He's
got this
fascinating.
really skanky girlfriend. She's amazing, but they look so.
They don't know what they're doing. And what they're doing is so amazing. It's just like, aesthetically what they do, it's incredible, from the haircut and when it's summer, he always walk like topless, and he knots his clothes on his head, on his arm. He doesn't know. For him, it's just like, he maybe doesn't even know it's that daytime. Maybe, but what he does is just incredible. And when they walk past us, we would turn.
Yeah, she's rough. She's rough and she's rude and she's amazing. She looks amazing. She sounds amazing. She's really hoarse. But yeah, I just love them, and I think we always come back to those two. You try and detract from that, and that they walk past, oh god, it's them again. So that is the muse. But we're talking about real people here.
Yeah,
we're not talking about, and it's interesting, because I think looking at kind of art, there was a point, I think, with the brand and with us, probably around COVID, after COVID, and I think there was a point when we started to think about ourselves and think about the brand and think about all of our drivers very differently. And I think that a lot of that came out of COVID, and a lot of time for self-reflection. And so I think before 21, 22, something like that, it was very much looking about art and looking at things and looking about places and these amazing rich references that you've got, looking at pictures like we're doing now, really looking at and drawing from those pictures. And I think there was a shift when we really decided to I just don't need any of that stuff, because we have got so much history ourselves that I'm in recovery, for example. I'm in recovery. We don't drink. There's a lot of this stuff. There's a lot of this kind of mental health stuff that circulates.
A lot of real life.
Yeah, a lot of real life stuff. And I think we're not afraid to question each other, question the industry, to question ourselves. And I think probably more than some people in the industry. And I think we're not afraid of that stuff. So I think we transferred that reference to ourselves, and I think suddenly, the brand from about 2022, something like that, became very self-referential, and it became very much about who we are, where we're from, and how we're thinking at the time. And that can change, but it's always about, the brand is always really about a celebration of kind of, I say celebration, but it's really a reflection of where we're at that point.
Yeah,
psychologically, emotionally, how we're feeding off each other. And even if we're not feeding each other, then that feeds into the collection sometimes as well.
And I think, finishing off and speaking about the future in our final image, it's a very personal, and it's a very special moment of, you've chosen the picture from your wedding, which was your AW25 show in January in Milan. And knowing you, I think we've had a few conversations, specifically with Luca, I've had a few conversations about how you very much were anti-establishment for a long time.
I'm anti-wedding.
Anti-wedding, anti-establishment, anti-kind of societal, those societal celebrational moments. Why did you choose this picture? And talk me through it.
Yeah. Well, we still are against all that. But, we were like in summer. We went in Sicily on holiday, and usually when we are on holiday, we come back very refreshed.
Naked on some rocks for like 3 weeks, just eating eating ice creams and just
Artichokes.
ice creams and artichoke, chilling out for 3 weeks, and you're supposed to come back invigorated, refreshed, full of ideas. And I just, I turned to Luca and I said, I don't know if I have any ideas for the collection. It was quite late in September.
But not because of the collection, I think.
No, but I
Because
think a little
it's a
bit
general.
though, because
I mean, we
but we come back, you're supposed to be refreshed and have ideas, and you come back, you think, God,
I think we cannot.
Sometimes fashion can become like a lot of creativity can become very performative. If you have to do another one each season, then have to produce this other thing. But I think we both just we're kind of dry and quite.
But also, it's a very particular time as well that we
That's what I mean.
that, we cannot avoid not talking about it. It's a bit dramatic time worldwide in anything, and if we dig a bit in fashion, is pretty tough. So to be like to be disenchanted, it's very easy as well, and to be a bit bored of all that is easy as well. So usually, something that would have refreshed us made us even more bored of it all. So when we were like, when we were thinking about the new collection, we were like, why do we need to constantly making new things? Why we talk about sustainability and we keep making clothes that nobody wants? Like, why do we need to continue to do this? Why can't we just do few things that we did already that we love so much and just repropose them in a better way for us, investing our energy in things that we love doing already? And and this was the kind of starting of the collection. So aesthetically went back to what we loved. But then, you cannot not talk about every time that you open your phone, you see what the fuck is happening in the world, right? Which is very sad. And, it's like, and it's very traumatic. And I think it's affecting mentally all of us. I think I'm a very mental, strong person. Fuck, like recently it's been fucking tough. So, it's like to look at things, as I'm saying, and to listen and choices that we're gonna go for and stuff like that. So I'm like, love is a great thing, but it's love as a word is not enough, because we all talk about love, but it's not enough. I really do think that we need to take actions. This is the thing. We need to pull our finger out our asses and do things, action things. So we wanted to action love, and we didn't know how to do it. Yes, you make collection-wise. Yes, you make your clothes that you love the most. But how do we portray love in a real way? And and one evening I was watching television and Jordan came in front of me and he said, "Why don't we get married at the show?" And I was like, yes, because it's so real for us. And maybe it's cheesy, maybe we force people, half of the people that were there, how can they be bothered to be at our wedding? But you know what? Fuck it. Now you gotta look at it. Because you know what? This is for us is real, for us is love. And that's what we say. Love needs to be seen. So for us was a very real statement of love. And it could have gone in millions of ways. And actually, surprisingly, we were shocked about the outcome, because obviously,
I think the true gauge of success for me from the wedding was how many people I saw crying at the end. Come up to us crying. So not that there's any measure of if it's successful or not or whatever, or how many people like it on Instagram or how viral it's gone, but just on a real personal level, how many people come up to me after the wedding and said that meant so much to me, and I'm amazed that you did it, and I'm really proud of you and to represent something within the community, within the industry, to be able to do it. Look, and it's kind of a mad idea. I don't also, I don't really believe, like you mentioned about institutions. I think we'd always pushed against this idea. Luca said, please don't ever, ever, ever propose to me, because I'll vomit. And I didn't. And I stayed very clear of doing that. But yeah, it just felt like the right time. And I think when when the chips are down, you have to draw on what really matters. And I think that really felt like we needed to do it at that time. It felt very kind of imminent about, and also, I think why I didn't really buy into weddings. I think there's this quite traditional sense of what weddings are, and this idea about property. I am yours and you are mine, and therefore you can do this and I can do this forever, and blah blah blah. And I make this promise and I make this vow. I don't believe in all that, because I think, I said on the wedding day that even all the promises that we've made to each other, we've probably broken them all anyway. So I don't think it's about saying, what, I promise myself to you, I give myself to you. I don't. We've been together for years and years, 13 years. And I think after a certain 13, 14 years, and after a certain amount of time, it takes on a different meaning. I don't need it, sort of loses some of its optimism. And I think within that, I think there's something really powerful, because I don't need the wedding. And I don't need this act to know that I'm going to be around forever, because we are. But I think, like Luca said, it really needed. I really, really wanted it to be seen. I felt really proud of it. Really proud of gay years are like dog years. We will talk about that.
And
But
especially in a country like Italy during Men's Milan Fashion Week and all these things, it was an important thing. I mean, of course, you think a bit before, like, of course, the government is very right wing, and of course, you think a bit about that, but you don't expect what's happened after. And I think the amount of messages that we get, of course, went viral, and we got so many messages from around the world, and you really realize how good it made to some people. And and this, I think, is the very success. And and nobody say anything bad about it. Everything was very pleased, and a bit like thankfully as well, like, thank you
there
for
were a few
showing it.
people. There were a few
Only few
people
people, the only negative comment that we got was like, oh, but the wedding took away from the collection. And my reply was like, good. Who fucking care about the collection? More loveless clothes for me in this moment, So if that's the only negative problem, it's fine. I'm absolutely fine with it. But the amount of love that we got, and people writing with their own story about mothers and brothers going through these love stories, like, oh my God, I'm not ready to be this figure
agony
of,
aunt. This agony aunt.
yeah, like these figure things. But it was incredible, and it was very real for us. And I think, you can say there's a marketing stunt, but it's fine, can be. But this is where market is authentic then.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah, 'cause
it
I think
was,
that was a bit of the-
that was a very authentic for
Well, a
us.
bit of the fear for me was about, is it a gimmick? Is it, there's talk about gimmicks in shows and putting something in the show that's not part of the show, but that it kind of enriches the show, blah, 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 or the show experience. And I thought, well, will it be perceived as a gimmick? But, the thing is, the idea really was about, let's get my mum, let's get Luca's parents to open the show. My mum was there, some of my best friends were there. Luca's brother was in the show, his sister-in-law, put all of our friends and family, all the people that we really love and cherish in the show. So it's very, very real. And it became very, what felt like a few minutes of like a market, sort of cynical marketing thing. I'll give it a few minutes of it to marketing, and we'll kind of make it go viral. But, but it became very real. The story of how we met, the journey of how we met, the bringing together, to, getting my mum to walk me down the aisle. It was very, very personal, and it was very, very, it was really special, actually. And it really, it kind of changed something in me that I didn't expect. I didn't expect to feel first I didn't expect to cry, and I did. I didn't expect it to make me feel the way that it did.
And in the evening we went for a dinner with all our families, and the day after we went on a little trip with all our families. So it was very real for us, even if we didn't show social media, but it was real. We really got married, and it's like, and I love how selfish act it was to drag everyone in our love story, but at the same time, I love how big it was as well for everyone to share this love.
Yeah.
And
that was your message.
And yeah, it was a message. And going back, I would do exactly the same thing.
Yeah. Well, in my final question for you is, what matters now in one sentence?
Health.
mind.
Jordan and Luca, thank you so much for being on
Thank
Fashion
you.
Forensics.
Thank you.
Thank you.